Some lessons don't come from books. They come from bruises.
They come from life.
There is no substitute for experience, period.
Some of the biggest successes were a byproduct of failure.
If you want to learn, build, and grow,
Why not learn from somebody who's already paid the price for success?
the wisdom is in the gray.
This is The Graybeard Show.
Graybeard Show. Learn,
Build.
grow.
And welcome to the show. You're listening to The Graybeard Show. My name is Shawn Davis, but I happen to go by Graybeard in case you didn't know. And today's show is all about somebody should have told you. 10 reasons you need a mentor before life does the teaching for you. So I'm going to jump into this straight away. Let me ask you something. And I want you to actually sit with this for a second. How many times have you been here before? Not exactly here, not this city, not this job, not this relationship, wherever those things are, but this feeling, this particular brand of being stuck, this specific flavor of frustrated. You've worked hard. You've tried different things. You've told yourself this time it's going to be different. And then somewhere around the month 3 or month 6 or year 2, you look up and realize you're right back where you started. Different circumstances, same result. If that hits close to home, I need you to understand something. That's not a character flaw. That is not evidence that you're broken or lazy or fundamentally incapable of moving forward. What it is evidence of something much simpler and much more fixable. You're operating without a map in territory that someone else has already navigated. Think about what that actually costs you. Not in some abstract sense. I mean in real dollars, real years, real emotional weight. Every time you make a mistake that an experienced mentor would have seen coming from a mile away, you're paying a tax. You're paying it in time. You're paying it in money. You're paying it in the energy it takes to rebuild after a fall that didn't have to happen. I spent years doing exactly this, building and rebuilding, making moves that felt smart in the moment and looked foolish in hindsight. And the humbling truth, the one I didn't want to accept for a long time, is that most of these mistakes weren't bad luck. They were predictable. Someone who had walked that road before me would have grabbed me by the shoulder and said, "Hey, I know where that path goes. It goes off a cliff. Let me show you a different way." You see, that's what a mentor does. Not because they're smarter than you, not because they have some gift you don't, but because they've already paid the tuition. They've already made the expensive mistakes on their own dime, on their own time. And now they're in a position to hand you the answers instead of making you take the test cold. There is no wisdom that replaces lived experience. I believe that deeply. But here's what most people miss. You don't have to live every experience yourself to learn from it. That's the entire premise of mentorship. You get to borrow someone else's scar tissue. You get to skip the chapter where everything else falls apart and go straight to the chapter where you know what to do because someone who's been through it is sitting across from you, telling you the truth. The people I've watched grow the fastest in business, in leadership, in life, weren't the smartest people in the room. They were the most teachable people. They were the ones willing to say, "I don't have to figure this out alone." And that humility, that openness, that willingness to receive guidance from someone further down the road, that's not weakness. That is one of the most strategic decisions a person can make. So, if you're sitting there thinking about all the places you've been spinning your wheels, all the seasons where you worked hard but didn't move forward, all the times you swore it would be different, Ask yourself honestly, who in your life has actually been where you want to go? Who in your corner has walked through what you're walking through and come out the other side? If the answer is no one, that is the problem. And it is a solvable problem. A mentor doesn't eliminate the difficulty. The road is still the road, but they hand you a flashlight in the dark. They shorten the timeline. They protect you from the mistakes that don't teach you anything except that you should have known better, and that is worth more than almost anything else you could invest in. Here's another benefit. Somebody finally tells you the truth about you. Here's something I want you to think about carefully because most people never actually examine this. Who in your life tells you the hard truth? Not the kind of truth that's wrapped in gentleness to the point where it loses all of its edges. Not the kind of truth that gets softened until it doesn't sting anymore, which also means it doesn't land anymore. I mean the real thing, the truth that feels like a hand reaching through your chest and rearranging something inside. The truth you didn't ask for but desperately needed. For most people, and I mean the majority, the honest answer is nobody, or at best one person. Maybe a spouse who knows you well enough to call you out, but loves you enough to sometimes let things go. Maybe a friend who will be honest after enough years of trust, but even those people have their limits. They have a stake in your emotional comfort. They live with the consequences of telling you something you don't want to hear, but you need to hear it. The people around you, your team, your employees, your colleagues, your kids, they're almost never going to give you the unfiltered version. Not because they don't care, but because they're operating inside the same system you are. They have something to protect. And when you're the leader, when you're the entrepreneur, when you're the person everyone else is looking to, you start to exist in a kind of echo chamber where your ideas get affirmed and your blind spots get reinforced because no one wants to be the one who tells the emperor he has no clothes. You see, a good mentor has no such hesitation. A mentor who's worth anything isn't interested in managing your emotions. They're interested in your outcomes. And because they're not inside your organization, not competing with you, not dependent on your approval, they can look at you clearly and say what they actually see. They can tell you that your competence is covering for an avoidance pattern. They can tell you that the way you show up in conflict is costing you relationships and revenue. They can tell you that the reason you keep hitting the same ceiling isn't the market or the economy or bad timing. It's a decision you keep making that you haven't examined yet. I've had those conversations. I've been on both sides of them. And I'll tell you this. The moments that changed the trajectory of my life the most were not the moments where someone told me I was doing great. They were the moments where someone sat across from me and said, "You need to hear this, and I'm going to say it because I'm for you." That combination, the hard truth delivered with genuine investment in your growth, that is one of the rarest and most valuable things one human can offer another. You see, the world will flatter you when you're succeeding and abandon you when you're not. A mentor will sit with you in both seasons and give you honest perspective in both. They'll celebrate what's actually working, not just what feels good. And they'll name what isn't working with the same directness. Here's the thing about blind spots that nobody talks about. They don't just cost you opportunities. They cost you relationships. They cost you the respect of people who can see what you can't. They compound silently over time until one day you look up and wonder why things stopped working. And the answer is something someone could have told you 3 years ago if you'd had the right person in your corner. Getting honest feedback about yourself, real feedback, not sanitized feedback, is one of the most uncomfortable and one of the most transformative gifts you can receive. A mentor is uniquely positioned to give it to you, not to wound you, not to tear you down, but because they can see you from the outside and they're committed enough to your growth to tell you what they see. If you've never had that experience, if no one in your life right now could sit across from you and tell you the hardest truth about yourself without flinching, then you are operating at a fraction of your potential. And you may not even know it. That's how blind spots work. If this is hitting home for you, if you like the idea of potentially working with a mentor, I've got 5 mentoring slots available right now for some special people. Don't know who that is. I just recognize special people when they reach out. If you want to reach out to me, if you have a situation where you think a mentor can add value, if you'd like the perspective of someone that has made more mistakes than they can count, but also had tremendous success in the process, then all you got to do is reach out. Take out your smartphone, go to your texting app. I'll say this twice. You key in this following number, 84503. Key that in on your texting app as though it's a phone number, like you're going to text a friend you just met. I know it's only 5 digits, but I promise you it's still going to work. If you take that 84503, put it into your texting app as though it's a phone number, and then simply text Graybeard. One word, my name. I'm the EY version of Gray, so Greybeard as one word, as though that's my name. That's what I go by. Text Graybeard to 84503. And I'll be in touch. Once again, all you got to do is text Graybeard to 84503. All right, let me talk about this. Benefit number 3. We're going through this series right now. I'm having a discussion with you on somebody should have told you 10 reasons you need a mentor before life does the teaching for you. So we've talked about a couple of them. First one we discussed was you stop making the same expensive mistakes on a loop. That's benefit number 1. Benefit number 2, somebody finally tells you the truth about yourself. Here's benefit number 3. Let's talk about this. You get out of your own head. So I want to describe something to you, and I want you to tell me if this sounds familiar. You wake up with an idea, a good idea, maybe even a great one. You spend the first part of the morning excited about it, but by mid-morning, you're already seeing problems with it. By noon, you've talked yourself into it and out of it twice. By the end of the day, you haven't done anything. Not because you're lazy, not because the idea was bad, but because you've thought about it so hard that it's become impossible to see clearly anymore. And so it goes into the pile of things you were going to do but didn't, the pile of momentum that never became movement. That is not a productivity problem. That is an isolation problem. And it is epidemic among driven, intelligent, self-sufficient people, which is exactly who is most likely to be listening to this right now. The smarter you are, the more dangerous your own head can be. Because smart people don't just overthink. They do it convincingly. They construct entire architectures of logic around their hesitation. They build elaborate cases for why now isn't the right time, why the conditions aren't right, why there's just a little more to figure out before they move. And from the inside, it all sounds very reasonable. It sounds like diligence. It sounds like strategy. But from the outside, it often looks exactly like what it is. Fear dressed up in analysis. A mentor cuts through that. Not because they're smarter than you, not because they have better information, but because they're not inside the story with you. They're standing outside the snow globe, watching you spin around in it, and they can see things from that vantage point that are completely invisible to you from inside. There's a question I ask people I work with, and it tends to land with a thud the first time they hear it. I ask, is this a thinking problem or an acting problem? Because most of the time when someone tells me that they're not sure what to do, they actually know exactly what to do. They've known for weeks. What they don't have is permission. They don't have someone to say, that's the right call. Stop waiting for certainty you're never going to get. Just move. Or the opposite happens. They're about to make a move out of urgency, out of desperation, or ego, or fear, and what they need is someone to pump the brakes and say, slow down. This looks like a decision, but it's actually a reaction. Let's think this through before it costs you something you can't get back. Both of those things, the push and the pause, require someone on the outside of your decision making, someone on the outside of your life, someone who isn't emotionally invested in a particular outcome, someone who can read the situation for what it actually is, not for what you need it to be in the moment. I think about the seasons in my own life when I was most stuck, and in every single one of them, looking back, the stuckness wasn't about a lack of options. It was about being so deep inside my own perspective that I couldn't evaluate the options clearly. I needed someone who had earned enough of my respect that when they said, you're overthinking this, or you're moving too fast, I could actually receive it. I could stop spinning long enough to see the ground again. That kind of clarity is not something you manufacture alone. It comes through relationship, through trust, through the honest voice of someone who has been in enough situations to know the difference between a real obstacle and a self-created one. A mentor provides that consistently, repeatedly. Every time you get tangled up in your own thinking, there's someone to help you find the thread. So if you're tired, genuinely tired of going in circles, of having the same internal arguments, of moving fast in every direction except forward, that exhaustion is trying to tell you something. It's trying to tell you that you are not designed to figure everything out alone. None of us are. And the decision to get a mentor is, at its core, a decision to stop treating your own limitations as a life sentence and start treating them as a starting point. Here's benefit number 4. The self-doubt gets quieter. Let's talk about something that almost nobody admits out loud, even though almost everybody experiences it. You've built something, or you're trying to build something, and on the surface, you present as confident. You talk the talk. You carry yourself like someone who knows what they're doing. But late at night, or in the quiet moments between the meetings and the calls and the noise, there's a voice. And that voice says things like, who do you think you are? What makes you qualified? What happens when people figure out you've been making this up as you go? That voice, it has a name. It's called imposter syndrome, and it doesn't care how successful you are. I've talked to people who've built companies worth millions, people who've led teams of hundreds, people who by any external measure have already won, and that voice is still running in the background of their mind, still whispering. Still planting seeds of doubt in the moments where the armor comes off. Here's what I've learned about that voice. You cannot argue it into silence. You cannot think your way past it. Willpower doesn't kill it. Success doesn't kill it. If anything, success can make it louder because now the stakes are higher and there's more to lose. The only thing that actually quiets that voice over time is a specific kind of accumulated evidence. Evidence that you are, in fact, capable. Evidence that comes not from just your own assessment of yourself, but from someone who has no reason to flatter you and who chooses to affirm you anyway because of what they see being real. A mentor provides that evidence. When someone who has genuinely accomplished things, someone who has seen what success and failure actually look like up close, sits across from you and says, you have what it takes, that lands differently than when your mom says it. It lands differently than when a cheerleader says it. It carries weight because it comes from a source that knows the difference. It's not encouragement for encouragement's sake. It's an informed assessment from someone with a track record and no incentive to lie to you. And equally important, a mentor also helps you distinguish between the self-doubt that's lying to you and the instinct that's trying to protect you. Not every whisper of uncertainty is imposter syndrome. Some of it is wisdom. Some of it is your gut telling you something your ego doesn't want to hear. Part of what a mentor does is help you develop the discernment to know the difference, to know when to push through the fear because it's just fear, and when to slow down because something underneath the doubt is actually worth listening to. I've watched people shrink themselves for years, because no one in their life ever told them in a credible, meaningful way that they were capable of more. Not because they weren't capable, not because the evidence wasn't there, but because they were surrounded by people who were either too close to see it clearly or not positioned to say it in a way that would actually land. Let me say this, and I hope you seriously hear me on this one. You are not put here to play small. I believe that. And I believe that most of the smallness we walk around in is not a reflection of our actual capacity. It's a reflection of the voices that have had the most access to us. If the loudest voice in your head is the one that says you're not enough, it is time to invite a different voice into the conversation. One that tells you the truth. One that has earned the right to speak into your life. One that sees what you're capable of and refuses to let you settle for less. A mentor doesn't just coach your strategy. They speak to your identity, and identity is where everything starts. Listen, if you'd like that type of mentorship, if you'd like to talk with somebody such as myself, I've got 5 mentoring slots available. 5, only 5. I'm selective on who I work with. That doesn't mean I won't work with you, but I've got 5 spots available. I want to know how important it is to change your life. If you'd like to speak with me, if you'd like to reach out, I'd love to connect with you. I want to speak to people that genuinely want a mentor to help them change their life. I believe my purpose is to uplift, inspire, and encourage people into meaningful and lasting positive life change. If that sounds like something you'd like to explore, then let's have a conversation. All you got to do is text Graybeard, Greybeard, to 84503 on your smartphone. Go to your texting app, key in that 84503 number, and then just text Graybeard, Greybeard, all as one word, Graybeard, as though that's my name. That's what I go by. But Graybeard to 84503. Let's have a conversation. All right. Benefit number 5. If you're just joining me today, I'm Graybeard. I'm a mentor. I'm talking about somebody should have told you 10 reasons you need a mentor before life does the teaching for you. And so we're going through this list of some of the strategic advantages that I believe only a mentor can deliver to you. And we've gone through 5 of them so far. So let's get to, 4 of them. Let's get to number 5. You stop wasting years on the wrong things. I want to give you a number that I think about more than I probably should. 40,000 hours. That's roughly the number of working hours in a 20-year career. 40,000 hours. And for most people, most driven, ambitious, genuinely hardworking people, a significant percentage of those hours gets poured into things that don't actually move them toward the life that they're trying to build. Not because they're not hardworking enough, not because they don't care, but because they've never had someone help them get clear on what actually matters versus what just feels important. The difference between activity and progress is one of the most dangerous gaps in the professional world, because activity feels like progress. Busyness feels like productivity. A packed calendar feels like traction. And when you're running at full speed in the wrong direction, the last thing you want to hear is that you've been running in the wrong direction, because that means all those miles meant something different than you thought. A mentor who's been around long enough has watched this pattern play out. They've seen people work themselves into the ground pursuing outcomes that were never going to get them where they actually wanted to go. They've been that person themselves in many cases. And because they've lived on the other side of clarity, the side where you finally understand what's worth your time and what isn't, they can help you get there faster, much faster. Think about what it would mean to cut 5 years off your timeline. Not by working harder, not by some magical shortcut, but by stopping sooner, by stopping the things that feel productive but aren't, by redirecting your energy toward the 2 or 3 things that actually compound, that actually build on each other and create real momentum over time. I've watched people come out of mentoring engagements and do in 18 months what they'd been trying to do for a decade. Not because they suddenly became more talented or more committed, but because they finally had someone looking at the full picture with them. Someone who could say, this effort is working. Double down on it. This effort is costing you more than it's producing. Let it go. That kind of strategic clarity is worth more than almost any tactic you could learn, any book you could read, any course you could take. Here's the thing about wasted years, though. They don't announce themselves. You don't get a notification that says, warning, warning, you've been spinning your wheels for 3 years and here's what it cost you. You just look up one day and wonder why you're not further along. Wonder why the hard work hasn't translated into the life you pictured yet. You wonder what you're missing. What you're often missing is altitude, the ability to see your situation from above the noise, above the daily grind, above the urgent but not important demands that eat your time alive every day. A mentor gives you access to that altitude regularly, systematically, not as a once-a-year retreat where you get inspired and come home to the same habits, but as an ongoing relationship that keeps recalibrating your compass so you're pointed at the right things. Your time is one of the things that you cannot get back. I don't care how much money you make, how well you recover from setbacks, how resilient you are. Time only moves in one direction. Every year you spend working hard in the wrong direction is a year you don't get back. That is not said to create fear. It is said because it's true. And because the urgency of that truth is exactly what should motivate you to stop navigating alone. The right mentor doesn't just make you more effective. They make you more intentional, and intentionality, real, tested, clear-eyed intentionality about what you're doing and why is the difference between a life that adds up to something and a life that's just full with things, busy things. Things that don't add up to the life you want to live. Here's benefit number 6. Somebody has seen this movie before, and they tell you how it ends. There's a thing that happens when you're in the middle of something hard, when you're in the valley, when everything around you is uncertain, when the path forward isn't clear, when the decisions in front of you feel impossible because every option has real consequences and you can't see far enough ahead to know which one is right. In those moments, most people are completely alone in a way that has nothing to do with how many people are around them. They may have a team, they may have a family, they may be surrounded by people who love them and want the best for them, but none of those people have walked through what they're walking through. None of them can speak from experience about what's on the other side of the valley. And so no matter how much support surrounds you, there's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from navigating genuinely new territory alone without a guide. A mentor who's been through it, actually been through it, not read about it, not theorized about it, but lived it, changes that entirely. You see, when I was going through the hardest financial season of my life, the most stabilizing thing I had access to was the voice of someone who had been through their own version of that fire and come out refined rather than destroyed. Not because they told me everything was going to be fine. They didn't know that, and they weren't going to lie to me about it. But because they could say, I've been here. Not exactly here, but close enough. And I know what this does to a person. I know what you're feeling right now. And I also know that this is not the end of your story unless you decide it is. That combination, the honesty that doesn't minimize the difficulty, paired with the perspective that comes from having survived it, that is irreplaceable. Because many of you listening to my voice right now think you're in the middle of something that you won't survive. I've been in those seasons 5-6 times where I really didn't want to survive, if I'm honest. I've had those times. I've had those feelings. I've had those thoughts. But now as I reflect back, as I look at, 5 or 6 times where I was deeply in despair because of life change, business failings, a bankruptcy, the IRS coming after me, all of it has taught me to be stronger. It's taught me that it is a season. It will end. It will not kill you. I used to say to my wife when we were being chased by the IRS and debt collectors, I said, well, at least they can't eat us. That's what we used to say. That's how we'd let off a little steam. At least they can't eat us. At least we're not being chased by lions in the African, safari or whatever. Pattern recognition is one of the most undervalued forms of intelligence, and it is almost entirely built through experience, not education. A mentor who has been operating in the real world for decades has a pattern library that you simply cannot replicate by being smart or by working hard. They've seen the warning signs that you don't know to look for. They've watched deals fall apart at the exact stage yours is at. They've watched relationships fracture in exact ways yours is beginning to fracture. And because they've seen the movie, they know how it ends under certain conditions. They can tell you what the ending is likely to be and what, if anything, you can do to change it. This is not pessimism. This is intelligence, the ability to look at a situation through the lens of experience and say, based on what I've seen, here's what this tends to become. That is one of the most practical gifts another human can offer you. It doesn't make the decisions for you. It doesn't take away your agency, but it gives you information that changes the quality of your decisions in ways that being smart alone never could. I think about the people I've worked with who were standing at crossroads, major decisions about their businesses, their families, their futures, and what they needed more than anything was not more information. They had plenty of information. What they needed was someone who had stood at a similar crossroads and could tell them what they learned from the road they chose. That kind of guidance doesn't come from Google. It doesn't come from a podcast. It doesn't come from a book written by someone who synthesizes other people's experience. It comes from a relationship with a real person who has actually lived the chapters you're standing at the beginning of. That is what mentorship offers. Not a guarantee, not a crystal ball, but something close to a flashlight in the dark held by someone who's walked this path before, who knows where the drop-offs are, who is willing to stay close enough to you to help you navigate. If that has appealed to you, I've got 5 mentorship slots available. Reach out to me. Text Graybeard, Greybeard. Text Graybeard to 84503. I'll be in touch. Once again, take out your smartphone, go to your texting app, key in 84503 as though it's a cell number that you're going to text. It's not. It's 5 digits. I understand. It'll work, though. I promise you. And then just text Graybeard. One word. Greybeard. Benefit number 7 of working with a mentor. You stop being alone in it. I know leadership is lonely, and I definitely know entrepreneurship is lonely. Being the one who's supposed to have the answers, the one everyone else looks to, is a particular kind of lonely that people who haven't been there don't fully understand. It's not that you don't have people around you. You probably do, but there's a version of yourself that you can't show those people. The version of you that might be scared. The version that doesn't know what comes next. The anxious version. The version that woke up at 3 a.m. running the numbers in your head and came up short. You can't show that version to your team because your team needs to believe in the mission. You can't always show it to your spouse or your family because they're carrying their own weight and they need you to be steady. You can't show it to your peers or your competitors because vulnerability in the wrong places has real costs. So, you carry it alone. And carrying it alone is one of the most insidious things that happens to high-functioning people because from the outside, they look fine, more than fine. They look strong, capable, in control. But on the inside, and I've lived this, on the inside, they're running on empty, isolated behind the very competence that everyone around them is counting on. And that isolation over time produces decisions made from exhaustion rather than clarity. It produces a kind of brittleness that doesn't show until something cracks. A mentor gives you a place to put it down, not forever, not as a substitute for doing the hard work, but as a space where you don't have to perform, where you can say, I don't know what to do, without it costing you anything. where you can show the version of yourself that is uncertain, that is tired, that is questioning whether the whole thing is worth it, and have someone receive with that without judgment and respond without panic. That kind of relational safety is not soft. It is strategic, because the person who has a trusted outlet for the weight they're carrying makes better decisions than the person who doesn't. The person who can be honest about what they're struggling with, at least somewhere, with at least one person, stays clearer, stays more grounded, and makes fewer of the reckless moves that come from too much pressure with nowhere to release it. I believe deeply from everything I've observed and experienced that one of the reasons so many capable people implode is not because they weren't talented enough or committed enough. It's because they isolated themselves inside their own strength until the weight became unsustainable. And the tragedy is that it was preventable. The right relationship at the right time could have changed everything. There's something else worth saying here, something that touches on faith. Scripture is full of the idea that we are not designed to walk life alone, that isolation is not strength, it is vulnerability, that the pride that refuses help is the same pride that precedes the fall. I'm not preaching at you. I'm just saying that this truth is not just practical, it is ancient. Every major wisdom tradition in human history has said some version of the same thing. Human beings need each other. We are built for community. We are built for mentorship. We are built for relationship that runs deeper than transaction. If you've been white knuckling it alone, if you've been carrying more than anyone around you knows, if you built walls around your struggle because you didn't know where it was safe to put it down, I want you to hear this clearly. That is not the only way. It is not the strongest way. And it is not working as well as you think it is. You don't need someone to carry it for you. You just need someone to help you carry it with clarity, with perspective, and with the knowledge that you've got someone in your corner who has been in a hard place and knows the way out. It's not weakness, that's wisdom, and it changes everything. Here's benefit number 8. Your decisions get faster and cleaner. If you work with a mentor, your decisions get faster and cleaner. Decision fatigue is a real thing. And if you're someone who carries a lot of responsibility, if you're the person who makes the calls, who sets the direction, who has to evaluate options and choose paths while everyone else is waiting on your answer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. By the time some people reach the end of the day, they've made so many decisions that the quality of every subsequent decision gets worse. Not because they've gotten dumber, not because the problem in front of them is harder, but because the cognitive and emotional bandwidth that good decision making requires has been depleted. And when you're depleted, you either avoid decisions entirely, which creates its own set of problems, or you make them fast and sloppy from a place of just wanting to be over with it. Now, compound that with the decisions that have genuine weight, gravitas to them, the kind that keep you up at night, the ones where the options are genuinely complex and the consequences are genuinely significant, where you're not just choosing between two things, but between two versions of your future, two directions for your business, two paths for your family. Those decisions don't just require bandwidth, they require clarity, they require a framework, they require some structure for thinking that helps you cut through the noise and get to what actually matters. A mentor accelerates that process dramatically, not by making the decisions for you. A good mentor never does that. They're not interested in creating dependence. They're interested in developing your capacity, but what they do is help you think more clearly. They ask the questions you're too close to the situation to ask yourself. They reflect back what they hear, not just the words, but the patterns underneath the words. They help you distinguish between the fear that's driving the urgency and the genuine urgency that actually warrants immediate action. And over time, working with a mentor doesn't just improve your decisions in the moment. It can rewire how you think so that the quality of your judgment improves even when the mentor isn't in the room. That's the compounding effect that people don't talk about enough. Yes, a mentor helps you in real time, but the more valuable gift is what happens to your thinking over months and years of that kind of engagement. You start to internalize the framework. You start asking yourself the questions the mentor would ask. You start catching yourself in the patterns that used to derail you earlier in the cycle before they become expensive. The mentor's voice becomes part of your internal dialogue, and your internal dialogue gets better because of it. I've made faster, cleaner, more confident decisions in the years since I've had consistent mentorship in my life than I ever made on my own. Not because the decisions were easier, not because the stakes were lower, but because I developed a better process, a better framework, a clearer understanding of my own tendencies, the ways I was likely to get in my own way, the places where my confidence outrun my judgment, and the triggers that made me reactive instead of responsive. If you're someone who feels paralyzed by decisions, someone who second guesses yourself constantly, someone who makes moves but never feels fully settled in them, that pattern is not permanent. It is trainable. And one of the fastest ways to train it is to spend time in consistent, honest conversation with someone who makes good decisions, who can show you not just what they decided, but how they thought about that and came to that decision. You absorb that. Over time, it becomes yours. And the clarity that used to take you weeks to reach starts arriving in hours. If that has some appeal to you, again, I've got 5 spots available. Tell me why you want to benefit from mentorship. Reach out. Let's have a conversation. I'm willing to do that. I'll spend 30 minutes of my time with anybody that's willing to reach out. If you believe that you can improve your life, I believe right now, as you hear my voice, my purpose, my mission on this radio is to uplift, inspire, and encourage people into meaningful and lasting positive life change. That's what I'm here to do. If that sounds like something you're down for, then text Graybeard, Greybeard, to 84503, and I'll call you back. Text Graybeard to 84503 on your smartphone. Go to your texting app, key in that 84503 number, and then just text my name. One word, Greybeard, Graybeard, to 84503. So as we close out the show, what we've been talking about, somebody should have told you 10 reasons why you need a mentor before life does the teaching for you. We've been through 8 of the reasons. It's time to close out the show. Benefit number 9, you stop settling because someone refuses to let you. I want to talk to the person who knows somewhere underneath all the noise, underneath the routine, underneath the version of yourself you present to the world every day, that you are capable of more than you're currently living. You're not failing. That's not what I'm saying. You might actually be doing pretty well by most measures, but there's a gap, and you feel it, a gap between where you are and where you know, if you're honest, you could be. Between the version of yourself you're living and the version you were put here to be. And instead of closing that gap, you've been managing it, making peace with it, calling it realistic, calling it responsible, telling yourself that the things you've let go of weren't that important anyway. That is settling, and it happens so gradually that most people never see it happening to them. It doesn't announce itself. There's no moment where you decide to stop growing, stop pushing, stop believing the bigger version of yourself. It happens in small surrenders. A dream delayed until it became a dream abandoned. An ambition postponed until it became an ambition forgotten. A standard quietly lowered until the lower standard became the new normal. One of the most powerful things a mentor does has nothing to do with tactics or strategy or frameworks. It's this. They remember who you said you were going to be. They hold the original version when you stopped holding it yourself. They see the potential you've stopped seeing. Not out of sentimental affection, but out of genuine discernment. And they refuse to participate in the smaller version of you. They will not congratulate you for getting comfortable. They will not validate the rationalizations you've constructed for why less is okay. That can feel uncomfortable. I want to be honest with you about that. There is a particular brand of discomfort that comes from being around someone who consistently holds a higher standard for your life than you're currently holding for yourself. It makes complacency harder to sustain. It makes the excuses harder to believe. It makes the gap more visible, which is exactly what needs to happen before you can close it. I've seen people who had been stuck in the same patterns for years, who had been telling themselves the same stories about why they couldn't do more, who had been quietly settling for a decade, and then something shifted. Not because their circumstances changed, not because an opportunity fell in their lap, but because they had someone in their life who kept asking, is this actually the best you have? Because I don't think it is. And eventually the pressure of being seen, really seen by someone who believed in your capacity became greater than the comfort of staying small. There's a passage I come back to often. The idea that iron sharpens iron. That the people we surround ourselves with have a direct effect on the edge we carry. You cannot maintain a sharp edge in blunt company. You cannot hold a high standard when everything around you normalizes a lower one. The environment you live in shapes the ceiling you believe you have. And a mentor, the right one, changes that environment in the most intimate way possible, from the inside out, through consistent relationship and honest expectation. If you've been settling, if you can feel the gap I'm describing, the gap between where you are, who you are now, and who you feel you were meant to be, I want you to hear this as clearly as I can say. That gap is not evidence that you've already become who you are going to be. It's not a verdict. It's an invitation to stop accepting a version of yourself that was designed by your circumstances rather than your choices, and to start pursuing the version of yourself that your best moments, the moments when you're most alive, most clear, most certain of your purpose, have always pointed toward. You don't need permission to become that person, but sometimes you need a witness. Someone who will not let you forget who you're capable of being, even when you're doing your best to convince yourself that where you are is good enough. That's what a mentor does, and it is one of the most powerful forces for change in a human life. Let's look at the last one here. Benefit number 10 of having a mentor: you finally move. Listen, we've covered a lot of ground today, and if you've been listening, really listening, I'd be willing to bet that something in this conversation has landed somewhere that feels like recognition, like something you already knew, said out loud, maybe the first time. Because that's what most of this comes down to, doesn't it? Not information, not a shortage of understanding about what the problem is or what the solution might be. Most of the people I work with are intelligent, capable, self-aware enough to have a pretty clear picture of what's standing between them and the life they want. The knowledge is not the problem. The problem is the gap between knowing and doing, the gap between clarity and commitment, the gap between understanding what needs to change and actually changing it. And that gap, that particular gap, is one of the most stubborn, most frustrating, most human gaps there is. The research on this is actually fascinating, and it confirms what experience already teaches. People make dramatically better decisions, take dramatically more consistent action, and move dramatically faster toward their goals when they are in a accountable relationship with another human being than when they are trying to do it alone. This is not a motivational cliche. This is behavioral science. We are wired, literally wired, to perform differently when someone else is watching, someone else is tracking, someone else is going to ask us what happened with the thing we said we were going to do. A mentor creates that, not as surveillance, not as pressure in the negative sense, but as a structure of accountability that makes moving easier than staying still, that tilts the whole equation. Because right now, for a lot of people, staying still is the path of least resistance. Nobody's asking, nobody's tracking, nobody's going to be disappointed if you don't follow through. Or at least nobody you'll have to look in the eye next week and explain yourself to. A mentor changes that math. Now there's someone who's going to ask. Someone who's going to remember what you said. Someone whose respect you've earned and don't want to lose. Someone who will celebrate real progress and will not let manufactured progress slide by without calling it out. That external structure, simple as it sounds, is often the thing that turns intention into action and action into momentum. And there's something else I want to say because I think it's important and it doesn't get said enough. Sometimes you don't move because you're waiting for the conditions to be right, waiting for the timing to be perfect, waiting for the fear to go away, waiting for the sign that it's safe enough, clear enough, certain enough to take the step. And I want to tell you something I believe with everything in me. Those conditions are never coming. The perfect moment is a myth. The fear doesn't leave before you move. It leaves because you moved. Let me say that again. The fear doesn't leave before you move. It leaves because you moved. And the clarity you're waiting for before you take the step, it almost always arrives after the step you take, not before. A mentor has been on the other side of enough of those moments to tell you that directly, to say, I know it doesn't feel safe. I know you can't see the whole staircase. Take the first step anyway. That kind of word at the right moment from someone you trust can unlock years of paralysis. It can change the direction of your life. I've watched it happen. I've experienced it myself. So here's where I land. And I want you to hear this not as a sales pitch, but as a genuine challenge. You've been listening today. You've undoubtedly recognized yourself somewhere in this conversation. You know there's a version of your life that's bigger than the one you're currently living. And you know, underneath all the good reasons you've accumulated for not moving faster, that the thing standing between you and that life is not a lack of capability. It's a lack of the right person in your corner. Somebody should have told you a long time ago that you don't have to figure this out alone. That there are people who have walked where you're walking and come out the other side with wisdom they're willing to share. That the smartest thing you can do is not to grind harder in isolation, but to reach out and say, I need a guide. That is not weakness. That is the decision that changes everything. I'm Graybeard, and I'm here because someone a long time ago was in my corner when I needed it most. Now, it's my turn to be in yours. If that sounds reasonable, if you'd like to explore mentoring with me, all you got to do is be proactive and reach out. I will respond to everyone that reaches out to me. I've got 5 mentorship slots available, only 5. I will be candid. I'm selective on who I mentor. I believe my purpose is to uplift, inspire, and encourage people into meaningful and lasting positive life change. But I want to help people that genuinely want to see positive change in their life. I used to say crudely, I want to work with people that are so sick of their own stench and tired of sitting in it that they're ready and willing to do what it takes to change their life. If that sounds like you, crude enough as it is, then reach out. All you can do is text Graybeard to 84503. If you take out your smartphone, all you do is go to your texting app, key in that 84503 number, key that in as though it's a cell number for a new friend you made. Okay, you're gonna text them. You're gonna meet with them for lunch next week, and so you're gonna save their number. So it's 84503. You're gonna text them, and then I want you to just type Graybeard, Greybeard, Graybeard. Type Graybeard to 84503. Hit send, and I'll be in touch. I'll give anybody that's interested in life change. If you're interested in being uplifted, inspired, and encouraged into meaningful and lasting positive life change, I'll give you 30 minutes of my time, no charge. Okay, we'll talk. All you got to do is reach out. Text Graybeard to 84503 on your smartphone. One last time, all you got to do is text Graybeard to 84503 on your smartphone. That came out wrong. I hope I didn't say what I thought I said. Anyway, I'll be back here same time, same place next week to talk more mentorship. I'm Graybeard. and I'm out for the day. This is The Graybeard Show.
The Graybeard Show. Learn,
build.
grow.